This is my 104th video on my work with OO gauge. See part 1 of this series for my reasons for getting into OO gauge when I already had a lot invested in working in N gauge and I didn't really have space available for a large, fully operational OO gauge layout. Also see my lengthy series on my N gauge railway modelling for smaller and more complex scenery and smaller scale trains running. This part deals with further progress on the shelf layout, adding to the stations a bit, fixing some problems with the track and making a stab at some grass and hills and things. I have to admit that my attentions with the shelf layout are a bit vague. I never did intend to landscape it very much. Apart from anything else, it's a bit of a devil to work on since large parts of it can only be got at by leaning very awkwardly across my previously existing Hornby layout. So it's a simple end-to-end layout running between two terminus stations, and there was never really intended to be very much to it beyond the stations themselves. Still, I thought I should make a bit of a gesture at making the intervening tracks less monotonous. And there's definitely more to be done on the stations themselves. Signals and signal boxes will also be coming, but not in this video. I just picked up the kits for the signal boxes from the Kitchener train show this morning. If you've followed my previous videos about this layout, you'll be saying, but you already did that, and yes, I did already make a video on assembling and placing the Hornby Terminus station, part 95. This, however, is a different Hornby Terminus station kit. This one I picked up locally at a good price on the basis that it was somewhat incomplete. This is what I got in this version. I really bought it just for the platform roofs, as the price I paid for it was less than it would have cost me to buy one more platform roof section from the UK. I'm in Canada. Much of the rest of the kit was there. The booking hall had the stone texture stickers applied to it, except for the chimneys. Most of the rest of the pieces were present, except for the small fittings, the clock and lamp and trolleys, etc., and some of the fencing. So I've now got a spare booking hall and quite a few spare platform sections. I also picked up locally one more platform roof section, so now I had 3 more bought locally, and you can see them assembled at the top here. This was my original Hornby Terminus station with the 2 roof sections that came with it, but with extra platform sections already added to it. I added 2 more roof sections, bringing the roof close to the ends of my extended platforms. Here's that station with trains at the platforms. And here's my other station, again with Hornby platforms, but with the Super Quick Terminus station building, built in part 100. This station now also has 4 roof sections, 1 more having come from the UK in addition to the 3 extra acquired locally. Because the platforms on this station are closer together due to the geometry of the Super Quick station, I can't actually fit the stanchions for the roof sections into the holes in the platforms because the platforms are too close together. I've just got them stood on the platforms for now. This is not generally noticeable as the fencing hides the bases of the stanchions, but it does show in a picture like this. I'm in 2 minds as to whether I should cut off those pegs on the bottom of the stanchions. This was another thing that I picked up locally at a good price. It's so much cheaper for me to buy things locally if I can find them rather than buying from the UK with currency exchange and shipping. But, of course, there isn't really a great deal of British stuff available here. Anyway, I bought this Hornby accessories pack as I figured much of the contents would be useful. I'm not sure about the telegraph poles and the little signs, and I don't really have an immediate use for another loading gauge. But I can use the buildings on my shelf layout. I put the water tower and the water crane outside my Hornby station. I replaced the hose on the crane with a piece of black heat shrink, as the red hoses that Hornby fit on their cranes always look wrong to me. I put the little cottage building just beyond the platforms on my other station. And I put the trackside huts here and there, beside one track and another. When I fitted the point motors under the points, I left fairly crude holes. I didn't feel confident enough to get too fancy about trying to fill in these holes, but I did figure that I could at least paint the white foam that was showing grey to make the holes less obvious. This one was the worst, as I originally made this pit in the wrong place and had to move it. I tried to paint the white foam that was showing with the same mixed grey paint as the main surface. I didn't risk painting the point motors themselves, as it seems they can be a bit temperamental at the best of times. I just tried to hide the most obviously showing white surfaces. But then I had further problems with the points. The motor under this one fell off, so I had to pull it up again to reattach the motor. And the point for the siding started to jam again, so I had to have that up again also. Altogether a fairly painful process, especially as these points are the most difficult to reach right behind my main Hornby layout. When I originally fitted the Pico point motors under the Pico points, I thought that they would stay in place okay by just pushing the fitting tabs through the holes in the plastic sleepers, but it seemed that couldn't be relied upon, so I used CA glue at this point to fix the fitting tabs of all of the point motors in place as part of this relaying process. As I said earlier, I wasn't intending to do a lot of landscaping on the shelf, but I thought I should try to add some slopes here and there. I used my hot wire cutter to cut foam pieces for a kind of embankment along one side of the tracks here. And I also cut some embankment pieces for part of the other shelf by the window. I cut these from some 2-foot by 2-foot pink foam tiles that I'd picked up and not ended up using for anything else. So the slopes were made up of 2-foot sections that I fitted together as best as I could. I made a paper template to get the shape for a hill to put in the corner here. I used that template to make the basis for the hill from a couple of layers of the pink foam. I seem to have trouble finding glue that will fix the foam together without dissolving it. I used the last of a tube of foam-to-foam glue that I had on this, but it didn't seem to want to stick, at least not quickly, so I held the pieces together tightly with masking tape so that the glue could have plenty of time to cure, after which it did actually hold the pieces together. I shaped the sides of the hill with the hot wire cutter and a bit of sanding. I put a base coat of white paint on the sides of the hill on the basis of these being underlying rock. Then I sort of dabbed on yellow and a bit of flock. I'm afraid I'm not really much of a landscaper. I lettered the sections of the embankment slopes as I took them off the layout so that I could fit them back in the same order. I painted the embankment slope pieces brown. I also painted the top of the hill brown. Then I applied static grass, something else that I'm not very good at. I painted on static tack glue and then shook on a mixture of static grass. Similarly, I applied static grass to the embankment slope pieces. I took all of the pieces back up to the layout, balanced on a piece of scrap card. I put the embankment slope pieces back into their positions beside the tracks. Here's the hill, between the main tracks and the end of the siding. And here's the other embankment slope by the window. I tried to stick down the embankment slope pieces with foam tack glue spread with a spatula. This wasn't entirely successful, but probably did some good. Here's the end of that slope coming towards the Hornby station. The glue will dry transparent when it dries. I had picked up this bag of Hornby Scenics trees locally. I wasn't really very thrilled with them when I got them out and examined them. They came with flat plastic bases, which could have been easily stuck down, I suppose. I drilled holes in the bases so that I could fit pins made from piano wire. I thought that the piano wire pins would make it easier for me to place the trees on my foam hill. Some of the trees had smaller bases that I just took off so that the wire forming the trees could be pushed directly into the foam. So these were my trees prepared for my little wood. I stuck them in place on the hill. Not really the most convincing looking trees, but I guess they'll pass as something approximating to trees from a distance. I retrieved some foliage tufts to fill in around the base of the trees a bit. I stuck foliage tufts here and there to hide the more obvious issues with the bases of the trees. And I placed the hill, now wooded, back on the layout. Not the most convincing, but hopefully moving a bit in the right direction. Here's a view down into the corner from the other side. Next, I tried to add some static grass on the shelf surface to try to blend things a bit. This was pretty awkward to do, given how hard to reach this part of the shelf is. I also applied static grass over by the window, where the shelf is a bit easier to get at. Once the glue dried, I vacuumed up excess grass, first with the model vac to reclaim the grass for possible future use, and then with a mains vacuum just to try to clean things up better, especially on the tracks themselves, as I don't want static grass getting into the mechanisms of my locos. This whole exercise wasn't really all that successful. I suppose it's better than the plain grey shelves, but the result is hardly very natural looking. Yeah, I'll have to think what else I can do. I was quite concerned about the effect of all this on the tracks. I hooked up a Hornby track cleaning wagon to my little pug loco and ran this over the tracks. I also used my trusty Pico track rubber to try to remove anything that had got on top of the rails, so interfering with contact. I was able to run my track cleaning train over all of the tracks, including passing it over all of the points. So I'm not too sure how worthwhile this whole slope and grass exercise was. I do have a Daypol motorised track cleaning car with built-in vacuum that I haven't unboxed yet, and I should probably get that set up and run it over these tracks before I do anything else in a further attempt to clean up any residual mess.